Let me tell you something real, something honest, something that hits you in that quiet place inside your chest where nobody else gets to see. There comes a moment in every woman's life where she finally says, enough. Not loud, not dramatic, not with a big announcement, just enough. And that moment, that pause, that choosing of herself, it changes everything. It's a moment like you locking a door the world didn't even know you were guarding. It's the moment a man finally realizes he's been standing in the doorway of something he didn't even fully appreciate. I've seen powerful things happen when a woman stops contacting a man. I've watched the shift. I've watched the silence become louder than all the words she used to say. And I want to take you on a journey today, a journey through the truth of what happens, not on the outside, but deep inside the soul of a person who finally remembers their own worth. Before we go anywhere, let me start with a story. I once knew a woman, smart, beautiful, strong, but she didn't know she was strong yet. You know the type, the woman who keeps giving chances like they're candy. The woman who texts first just to keep the conversation alive. The woman who checks on him even though he never checks on her. The woman who keeps holding on, hoping he'll one day show up the way she shows up. Well, one day, she stopped. No fight, no anger. No, look what you're losing. She just stopped contacting him, and the world shifted. Not because she became colder, but because she became clearer. And as her clarity grew, something else started happening. He felt it. He noticed it. He began realizing what silence feels like when it comes from the one person who used to pour into you. And today, I want to walk you through the 7 big transformations, the 7 inner shifts that happen when you stop contacting a man, not because you're playing a game, not because you're trying to manipulate somebody, but because you've decided to rediscover yourself, reclaim your energy, and rewrite the narrative. This isn't about punishment. This is about power. This isn't about running away. This is about rising up. This isn't about losing him. This is about finding you. And now we begin this journey, the inner metamorphosis that unfolds when you stop contacting a man. Your silence awakens his awareness. There comes a moment in life where silence becomes the most powerful language you'll ever speak. When a woman stops contacting a man, it doesn't matter how strong, how confident, or how uninterested he pretended to be. That silence hits him somewhere unexpected. It hits him in the ego first, then in the pride, then in the conscience, and finally it lands in the heart. Because silence, when it comes from a woman who used to care, is not emptiness. It's evidence. Evidence that something has shifted in her spirit. Evidence that something is no longer the same. Evidence that she has reclaimed something he didn't even know she lost. And for the first time, he becomes aware, painfully aware, that the attention he thought would always be there isn't. A man gets used to patterns. That's how most men function. If you always call first, he expects it. If you text every morning, he assumes you will. If you check on him when he's quiet, he treats it like a natural law. He begins to confuse your consistency with inevitability. But the moment you stop, really stop, the world inside his mind begins to shift. At first, it's casual. She's probably busy. Then maybe she fell asleep. But by day 2, 3, 4, something else kicks in, something he didn't plan for. A growing awareness that your presence wasn't guaranteed. Your time wasn't automatic. Your love wasn't permanent. And that awareness becomes a mirror, reflecting back everything he failed to appreciate. See, silence doesn't scream. It whispers truth. And that whisper gets louder every hour you don't reach out. He starts replaying old messages, scrolling through conversations, remembering moments when you tried, when you cared, when you asked questions, when you showed concern. And instead of feeling supported, he feels empty. He notices the holes left behind by what he once took for granted. He feels the absence of energy he thought he deserved but never earned. And the more he feels it, the clearer things become. You weren't just someone who texted him. You were someone who poured into him. You didn't just reach out, you connected. You didn't just check in. You cared. But awareness doesn't just happen in his world. It happens in yours. When you stop contacting him, you begin to hear your own voice again. You realize how often you silenced your needs to accommodate his comfort. How many times you reached out while ignoring your own intuition? How many days you held on to hope that someday he'd match your effort? And suddenly, in your own silence, you start to awaken. You notice how deeply you were stretching yourself. You notice how much emotional weight you were carrying. You notice how exhausted your heart feels now that it's finally resting. This awakening is powerful because it shifts your role from pursuer to observer. You stop trying to make him see your value, and instead you see it. You stop chasing clarity from him, and instead clarity finds you. You stop asking, why isn't he trying? And start understanding, I shouldn't have been trying this hard to begin with. And meanwhile, the awareness in him grows heavier. A man who once felt in control starts feeling replaced by the silence, because silence makes him wonder, who's she talking to now? Who's checking on her? Who's giving her the attention I never did? Even if there's nobody else, the idea alone humbles him. He realizes he is no longer the center of your emotional world. That realization bruises his ego, but awakens his heart. It cracks the armor he once wore. It forces him to evaluate himself in ways he's avoided for months, maybe years. He remembers your kindness, your softness, your effort. And he starts questioning his decisions, his behavior, his lack of appreciation. Why didn't I treat her better? Why did I act like she'd always be there? Why didn't I show up the way she showed up? Those questions don't go away, they echo. Awareness is a painful teacher, but a necessary one. And sometimes silence is the only thing strong enough to force a lesson the heart refused to learn before. But here's the most important truth of all. Your silence is not about him becoming aware of you. It's about you becoming aware of yourself. Because when you stop contacting a man, you don't just change the dynamic, you change your destiny. You reclaim your power, your dignity, your confidence, and the truth that you never needed to chase love to deserve it. Your silence isn't empty. It's sacred. It's the beginning of your awakening, and the moment his truly begins. Your self-worth rises and rewrites your spirit. There is something sacred that happens inside a woman the moment she withdraws her energy from someone who didn't know how to honor it. It's like the fog in her mind finally begins to lift. The noise in her heart starts to settle, and the truth she's been ignoring for far too long becomes impossible to silence. When you stop contacting a man, you don't just reclaim your time, you reclaim your worth. And that shift is powerful. It doesn't happen with fireworks. It doesn't happen with grand speeches. It doesn't happen with drama. It happens quietly, softly, like a sunrise that doesn't ask for permission to rise. It simply comes. It simply shines. It simply reveals what was always there. Because the truth is, sometimes you don't even realize how low your self-worth has fallen until you stop giving to someone who never poured back into you. And the moment you stop, you feel something you may not have felt in a long time. Yourself, your own energy, your own intuition, your own voice. You start remembering who you were before you kept shrinking yourself to fit inside someone else's lack of effort. You start remembering the version of you who used to believe she deserved more. You start remembering the woman you were before you got tired, before you got drained, before you got used to accepting breadcrumbs as if they were full meals. Self-worth doesn't shout, it whispers. But when you stop contacting him, that whisper becomes a roar inside your chest. You begin seeing the difference between giving love and giving yourself away. You begin recognizing the moments when you lowered your standards because you were afraid of losing someone who wasn't even afraid of losing you. You see clearly how many times you said, it's okay, when it wasn't. How often you pretended you didn't need more. How often you settled because you wanted connection more than you wanted honesty. And in that clarity, something profound happens. You start forgiving yourself. You stop blaming yourself for trying too hard. You stop judging yourself for wanting love. You stop carrying guilt for seeing the good in someone who didn't know how to appreciate it. You start realizing that loving deeply is not your flaw. It's your gift. Your heart has always been valuable. It's just that you handed it to someone who didn't know what to do with it. When your self-worth rises, you stop thinking, why wasn't I enough for him? And start recognizing who wasn't enough for what I give. That right there is transformation. That right there is healing. That right there is the shift that turns a wounded woman into a powerful one. And let me tell you something else. When your self-worth rises, your boundaries rise with it. You no longer tolerate the bare minimum. You no longer chase clarity from someone who struggles to communicate. You no longer fight for attention from someone who barely shows up. You stop putting yourself last. You stop giving discounts on your heart. You stop bleeding for relationships that were never willing to bandage you. Instead, you start pouring that energy back into places that fill you. You start treating yourself like someone valuable. You start nurturing your dreams again. You start reconnecting to your purpose. You start healing parts of you that you ignored while chasing someone who wasn't chasing you. You start seeing the world differently, not through the lens of, I hope he notices me, but through the lens of, I've finally noticed myself. And the more your self-worth rises, the more peace becomes your priority. You stop wanting chaos, inconsistency, half-love, and emotional guesswork. You want stability. You want honesty. You want effort that matches yours. You want someone who sees you, hears you, values you, and doesn't wait for your absence to realize your presence mattered. And here's the beautiful part. Once your self-worth becomes unshakable, you don't return to the things that broke it. You don't go back to the conversations that drained you. You don't reopen doors you had to close to find yourself again. Because once a woman knows her worth, she never forgets it again. She may have doubted it. She may have lost sight of it. She may have buried it under fear, disappointment, or loneliness. But once it rises, truly rises, it becomes her shield, her guide, her foundation. Your spirit starts rewriting itself. From a story of, I hope he chooses me, to, I choose myself. From, I wonder if I'm enough, to, I know what I deserve. From, I'll wait for him to realize my value, to, I won't wait for anyone to understand what I already know. Silence didn't just make him aware. It made you awaken. And that awakening is the beginning of a new chapter, one where your heart is no longer an afterthought, but a priority. His ego breaks down and his heart wakes up. There comes a point in every man's life where the silence he once thought he could handle becomes the very thing that cracks him open. At first, when you stop contacting him, it's his ego that speaks. His ego tells him, she'll be back. She always comes back. His ego tells him he's still in control, still the one calling the shots, still the one who gets to decide how close or how distant things stay. But ego is a fragile thing. It looks strong on the outside, but it's hollow on the inside. Your silence is the one thing that knows exactly how to tap on that hollow shell until it finally falls apart. A man's ego is the first to react, but it's also the first to crumble. Nobody tells you this, but a woman leaving a man alone with his own thoughts is one of the most powerful things that can ever happen in his emotional world. Because suddenly the script changes. The power dynamic shifts. The roles rearrange themselves in ways he didn't expect. The man who once assumed you needed him starts realizing he was the one depending on your energy more than he ever admitted. And the longer your silence lasts, the more that ego begins to dissolve. It's slow at first. Tiny cracks forming in the armor he built around himself. He starts checking his phone more often. He rereads old conversations. He scrolls back through memories trying to find clues he ignored. Your absence becomes a puzzle he doesn't know how to solve. And that frustration isn't really about you being gone. It's about him facing a truth he's avoided. He was never as secure as he pretended to be. Silence exposes ego. Silence reveals insecurity. Silence forces reflection. He begins asking himself questions he never had to ask before. Why hasn't she reached out? Did I do something wrong? Was she unhappy? Is she really done with me? Is she talking to someone else? These questions don't scream, they haunt. They sit in the back of his mind while he goes about his day. They follow him into the gym, into the car, into his conversations, into his sleep. He may try to brush them off, but they cling to him like shadows he can't outrun. That ego that once made him feel superior now makes him feel insecure. That ego that once convinced him he could take you for granted now reminds him how easily he could lose you. That ego that once encouraged him not to try too hard now whispers, you should have tried harder. And as those walls fall, as those defenses crumble, something deeper begins to emerge. something he didn't expect, something he didn't prepare for, something real, his heart. Because here's the truth about men. Most of them don't feel love in the moment they have it. They feel it in the moment they lose what made them feel safe. And your silence becomes the trigger that wakes up emotions he buried, ignored, or avoided. His heart begins to feel the weight of your absence. His heart notices the lack of warmth, the lack of support, the lack of connection. His heart starts missing the softness you brought into his life, the comfort of your messages, the reassurance of your energy. What once felt normal to him now feels like a void. What once felt guaranteed now feels like a blessing he mishandled. And that's the stage where ego fades completely and heart steps forward. Heart doesn't ask who's right or wrong. Heart doesn't care who texted last. Heart doesn't care about pride, power, or control. Heart only feels. And what it feels deeply and quietly is fear. Fear of losing you for good. Fear of realizing he didn't show up. Fear of facing the consequences of taking you for granted. That fear isn't meant to punish him. It's meant to wake him up. It's meant to remind him of your value. It's meant to teach him what he didn't learn when you were still giving him your presence. And in that awakening, something else happens. He begins to soften. The man who acted distant becomes thoughtful. The man who acted uninterested begins to reflect. The man who acted careless begins to care. The man who acted like he could go days without hearing from you starts feeling those days like a weight. And while all this is happening inside him, you're changing too. Because his ego breaking isn't just about him. It's about the shift in the entire dynamic. It opens space for you to see him without the illusion. It opens space for you to recognize your own emotional strength. It opens space for you to understand that you were never powerless. You were just giving too much power away. His ego breaking is not the end. It's the beginning of honesty, the beginning of clarity, the beginning of him finally seeing what you were offering all along. And whether you choose to let him back in or keep moving forward, remember this: the moment his ego breaks is the moment your worth begins to rise beyond anything he can overlook again. You step into a new level of emotional independence. There is a moment after you stop contacting a man where something inside you begins to shift, not outwardly at first, but deeply, internally, in the quiet corners of your heart, where your truth has been waiting for you to return. For so long, you may have tied pieces of your happiness, your peace, your validation, even your daily emotional rhythm to someone else's effort, attention, or inconsistency. You didn't mean to. You didn't plan to. It just happened because when you care with your whole heart. But when the silence begins, when the messages stop flowing outward from you, you start to feel something you haven't felt in a long time, your own emotional independence waking back up. Emotional independence isn't about pretending you're cold. It's not about shutting people out, building walls, or acting unbothered. It's about remembering that your heart, your energy, your joy, and your peace belong to you before they belong to anyone else. And when you stop contacting him, you start experiencing this truth in real time. You begin recognizing how much space you were giving away without noticing. You begin realizing how much of your emotional balance you tied to his replies, his attention, his mood, and suddenly, the silence gives you a gift you didn't expect: the chance to stand on your own emotional feet again. At first, it may feel strange. You might feel the pull to reach out like you used to. Your mind may wander toward old habits. You may feel the urge to check if he noticed your absence. But every time you resist that urge, a new strength rises in you, a new confidence, a new awareness of your ability to soothe yourself, support yourself, and be present with yourself without needing someone else to complete the emotional picture. You start learning that you don't need constant reassurance to feel valuable. You don't need external validation to feel beautiful. You don't need someone else's attention to feel worthy. And the longer you sit in that silence, the more you realize your emotions aren't fragile. They're powerful. They're your compass. They're your guide. They're your responsibility, not his. And something incredible happens when a woman reconnects with her emotional independence. Her world expands. She starts focusing on herself again, not in a selfish way, but in an authentic, soul-awakening way. She starts watering her passions again, Those dreams she put on pause, those goals she kept delaying, those hobbies she abandoned because her heart was too busy managing someone else's inconsistency. She starts rediscovering joy in the simple things: her morning routine, her accomplishments, her self-care, her peace. This shift doesn't happen suddenly. It unfolds gradually, like a flower reopening after a long season of neglect. Every day you choose yourself, you bloom a little more. Every day you don't reach out, you root yourself deeper in your own strength. Every day you honor your silence, you reclaim another piece of the power you gave away. And here's the beautiful part: emotional independence changes the way you view connection entirely. Instead of clinging, you become selective. Instead of settling, you become discerning. Instead of fearing loss, you become anchored in your own presence. You start realizing that love is something you share, not something you chase. You want partnership, not dependency. You want mutuality, not imbalance. You want someone who adds to your life, not someone who becomes the center of it. You stop living in emotional survival mode. You stop carrying the weight of a relationship on your own. You stop feeling responsible for holding everything together. Instead, you relax into your own emotional space, one that isn't dictated by someone's inconsistency or absence. And as you grow stronger, something else becomes clear: emotional independence doesn't make you hard. It makes you whole. You don't lose your softness, you reclaim it. You don't lose your ability to love, you elevate it. You don't shut down emotionally, you learn how to open up without losing yourself in the process. And while all this is happening inside you, he starts feeling the shift too. He senses that your energy has changed. He sees that your world no longer revolves around him. He notices that you no longer seek his approval, his attention, or his validation. And this change rattles him because he realizes he's no longer the center of your emotional universe. But here's the truth: this transformation isn't about him. It's about you. It's about you finally understanding that you were never meant to carry someone else's emotional load. You were never meant to sacrifice your peace to earn someone's presence. You were never meant to shrink yourself to fit inside someone's small vision of love. Emotional independence is your rebirth, your rediscovery, your return to yourself. And once you step into this new level of emotional independence, you don't just survive without him. You thrive, you rise, you glow. And for the first time in a long time, you feel something real, something pure, something empowering you.